Just double check. This chair is super loud. All right. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Beyond the Cut. Thank you guys so much for joining for my last episode of season one. Um, Today, I have my guest and close friend, Josh Bellinghausen. Josh, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name's Joshua Bellinghausen. I am a auto detailer primarily, but I also do improv comedy, teach improv comedy, and then on the side, then I'll make sets and props and whatnot. Dabble a little in special effects.
Yeah.
Other than that, then I'm just I would say generally speaking, if there's a nerdy interest, I probably have at least some acquaintance with that.
Yeah. Um, so, for context, for people that don't know, Josh and I have pretty much known each other since, what would you say, fourth or fifth grade?
Something like that, yeah.
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 And it's been cool because our moms were friends for a long time, and then as we got older, we just continued to stay in touch, and it's been really cool to see how the both of us have been growing up and our aspirations and the things that we're pursuing have changed dramatically since we were in elementary school. So both of us are entrepreneurs. Both of us, I believe, are kind of pioneers in our own families. And so to tie into that, what would you say, Josh, has gotten you into wanting to go into more of the um, theatrical creative arts between improv or theater? What got you into that?
Yeah. So improv is kind of a weird one because uh it kind of fell into my lap a little bit. So with improv, I took my first improv class going on 9 years ago, back in I guess middle school. Uh, and so when I took that class, it was at a homeschool co-op. It was there. It seemed fun, and all my friends were doing it, so I did it as well. And then I kind of transitioned into a different co-op. They happened to have their first improv class that they ever did that year that I switched co-ops, and then that pretty much fed into itself. So it's been something that I started doing, I think, as like kind of a self growth, you know, becoming more sociable exercise. And then as I started to study it more and study more of the philosophy behind it and come to an understanding of it, then I fell in love with it more. And then in terms of the props and stuff, really, I grew up on Mythbusters, and Mythbusters was probably one of my favorite shows growing up. And the people who made Mythbusters were all props and sets and special effects guys, right? So that's really what introduced me to the concept of doing that. And then through connections I made with improv, then I was able to do some theater work throughout high school and making props and sets for, I believe I did sets for 8 shows over the course of 3 years in high school, and then I stage managed for all 8 of those shows as well.
So, what would you say after you did the research of like the psychology of theater? What what was your findings from that? Because I don't think I know that.
So there's really two directions I could take that question, I guess. So are you interested more in the process of how good improv comedy works, or improv theater in general works, or would you be more interested in how um, the psychology of how theater affects us, more from like the audience relationship to the media?
I mean, I think more of the audience
Yeah.
relationship.
So this applies to live theater. It applies to everything, I think. But I know personally for live theater, I'm able to connect with certain genres a lot more through that, like comedy. I'm able to connect a lot better through live theater than through recorded media. That's just me. But so comment, or it's all about, right, with when we watch something, then it's going to be connecting with us. It's going to be connecting with our emotions a lot of times. In my mind, then there's kind of two things that a piece of art can mean. It can mean it means what the artist intended, right? If you've got a painting and it's meant to represent these, theme XYZ, or the theme of let's say the theme of hope, then that's one meaning of it. That's the intended meaning. So I like to call it the objective meaning of the art, because that's can be known for certain. But then you also are going to have the subjective meaning, which is what the audience brings to it. So a great example of this is there's a lot of really silly comedies that a lot of people have very deep emotional connections to, because of what they were going through when they saw that comedy and what that comedy meant to them in those moments, right?
Yeah, no, and I think even learning about just the relationship that we as moviegoers or audience members, how we each have, I think, have personal relationship with the content that we consume, just in general, regardless of if it's the theater or just scrolling on social media. I think in some capacity we all have some sort of tie to it, and in that way, I think that the what we consume and what we also produce is super important, because it really plays into who we are as people, and especially when we are producing, how can we best, this plays into marketing, but how can we best play into that one target audience? How are we trying to play into multiple target audiences? How can we best produce that type of content to portray the meaning or the hidden message that you know we are trying to convey? And so that's super cool that you researched that. It's something that I've definitely thought about a lot, especially as a producer, trying to figure out what type of movies and TV shows people actually want to see,
Mhm.
that people haven't already seen, and that it's an original idea and that it's not all recycled material, but that people actually do want to see it. I think that's super important. So yeah.
Right. I think it plays into the cultural moment as well, right? So something you see a lot is um, the kind of the cycle of hopefulness in media. And so you look at times in the past where media was very hopeful, very much, the hero always wins, very kind of clean cut. And then you get into periods where it's not that way, where it's oftentimes it's an anti-hero. Oftentimes there's a subversion of the good versus evil idea. Um, and so there's kind of this way in which, based on how the world is,
Yeah.
then people seem to like having some in their stories. They seem to like having a contrast to that.
Mm.
So I this is one term I've heard people describe it as, but it's saying like in the 50s, right? 50s and 60s, then you had modernist film, right, which was kind of that hopeful look at things. And then going into like the 80s and 90s, then you got more into postmodernism, which is more of that uh you can't like less hopeful, right? You can't trust things, you can't trust heroes aren't like a real concept in postmodern films a lot of times.
Yeah.
um But then we're kind of in our current cultural moment, things I think a lot of people would agree are a little bit bleaker feeling in the world. And you look at the movies that are doing really well right now, or that have done really well in the last couple of years. You've got something like K-pop Demon Hunters,
Right.
a very pretty straightforward, pretty simple plot line, right? But it doesn't really try too hard to subvert expectations. It doesn't really try to be countercultural too much. It's just saying, hey, here is a good, hopeful story where the heroes win and it's a success, and we end on a hopeful note, and we're going to tell that story very, very well, very competently in all of the technical aspects of it. And that was an incredibly successful product.
Yeah. But I also think what was interesting was me and my friend, we went to a film festival. It was a smaller one. But it was my first time going to a film festival like that. And what I was trying to do was learn from other people, what kind of content were they producing. So for context, me, Josh, and a few other people, we had finished making a short film that we entered into 4 different film festivals. And so one of those ones is the one that I went to. And it was their inaugural film festival. And so they were only screening shorts because obviously you don't have a lot of time to watch an entire feature. Um, but we had entered into the short film category. And so what I learned is that because I was taking notes the entire time because I'm like, I need to figure out because unfortunately we were not selected for that specific film festival, but I still thought that it was going to be a good idea to just go and learn. Um, and so what I learned is that we try to tell an entire, almost like a feature film story in 20 to 25 minutes. And it was our film ended up being 25 to 30 minutes. But unfortunately, it wasn't selected. I don't know why, but what I was trying to do is try to figure out why, what other people produced, why theirs was selected. And so what I learned was um, some of the directors for some of the shorter films, he had said that you need to come up with a story that is so simple that you can explain it to anybody, and it doesn't need to be complicated. Actually, the more complicated you get with the story, that's actually where you lose people. Um, and I just found that so interesting because I was just like, that is really interesting. I don't think we thought about that when we were writing that movie. So I was just like, we just need to tell a story, and it didn't even occur to me that when somebody asked me about it, I was just like, oh, it's just like a murder mystery noir film. And then I never really thought about like the actual complexity of it when you watch it. And I'm like, okay. So that's interesting. So just kind of like creating stories that are just so simple in theory, but yet complex enough when you actually watch the movie itself. But being able to grab your audience, their attention within the first 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Like you're hooked. They're hooked for the entirety of the movie instead of waiting 2 hours into a 3 hour movie. Where is this going? What
Right.
kind of story are we telling?
There was I think it was someone quoting a quote, but saying in a live theater production, you have an hour before people are going to get up and start walking out. You have in a movie theater, you've got 10 minutes before people are going to get up and walk out. On a TV format, you've got 30 seconds max before people are going to change channels. And that stuck with me of like the barrier to watching it is so low.
Yeah.
Right, the barrier to changing is so low that if you don't grab them right away, there's nothing keeping them there.
Right, but even with social media, what I've been learning is what a lot of successful creators say is you have to be able to hook the audience within the first 3 seconds. 3 seconds. I'm just like, how in the world are you supposed to create content? And people do it. I mean, people do it. I mean,
Right.
3 to 5 seconds, but 3 seconds into the either 30-second video or 90-second video, because unfortunately, we're at a place right now as a society and as a race where our attention span is so short that if that dopamine hit is not, if we don't get that within 3 seconds, we're gonna scroll past and we're just gonna completely ignore it. But it's the same thing with TV, movies, um, and even with shows. It's just crazy. But from, like I was saying, just coming from the producer's perspective, the people who are actively creating something, or people that do want to create stuff. Unfortunately, as uh, as disappointing as it is to have to force yourself to hook to put your audience in an uncomfortable place where you have to, or put yourself in an uncomfortable place where you have to hook them that quickly.
Mhm.
um, because that was not always the case. Um,
Right.
that definitely changed along with social media and the whole short form content that has definitely changed within the past 10 years.
Hmm. And of,
Because, sorry, go ahead.
and of course, the interesting thing is you can get to a place where you don't have to play by the rules anymore
Right.
because you've got, like the Odyssey. I don't remember if it's already come out or it's coming out in a few days.
Hmm.
Christopher Nolan has enough social capital
Yeah.
that he could have. I'm assuming it's going to be about 3 hours.
Yeah, it
He
is.
could spend the first hour and basically nothing interesting could happen, and people would be fine with that.
Right.
You would hear people piping off on occasion, but in a general sense, people would be fine because he's built up enough trust with the audience over the last 30 years or so.
Right.
So the ironic thing, I guess, with all creative projects is
Hmm.
when you're starting out, people don't trust you. And so you have to earn their trust.
Yep.
But then when you're later on, then you don't have to. It gets easier almost. The bigger you are, it gets easier, which I guess makes sense. But it's it feels counterintuitive, I guess.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of giving and taking with that, um, because obviously, like, these bigger directors like Christopher Nolan, Steven Spielberg, James Cameron. I mean, Avatar is not for the faint of heart. I mean, it's a 2.5, 3 hour movie, right? So, what I noticed is that, for example, uh, John Favreau, who directed the first Iron Man,
Hmm.
their budget was, I don't know the specific number, but I'd like to think it was 10 to maybe 30, $40 million, which in the grand scheme of things nowadays, that's a small budget, right? So they had to make a lot of, not shortcuts, but they had to make do with the budget that they were given. And so we've gotten so used to these bigger budget films that the production quality is so high, and yet the story is just lacking, right?
Hmm.
So yes, I agree with what you were saying, but I also think that there is, um, how do I say this? Um, I think people get lazy
Right.
with the actual storytelling, or they let the politics behind the film get to them instead of just being
Right.
instead of being the filmmakers when they were just starting out. Because I think those starting days are actually better
For
than when
sure.
you've potentially made it, because you had to make a way for you to make your dreams become a reality.
Hmm.
Um, and for example, you mentioned the Odyssey. Um, we're talking about a movie with a $250 million budget. I mean, we're throwing around hundreds of millions of dollars like it's nothing, right?
Right.
But then, I was initially super excited for that movie because I love Greek mythology. I love
Hmm.
movies about it. I think those types of movies and even just war movies in general are my favorite genre of movies. But then started getting leaked about the movie, about the castings and the story itself, and it just got super political very quickly. And I'm just like, somebody as, like you said, who has a lot of social capital, like Christopher Nolan, um, potentially let that affect his filmmaking process. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, that's kind of how it is nowadays. Uh,
Right.
as much as we don't want that to happen, and we want our favorite directors to continue making these great movies, unfortunately, there's a lot of darkness that goes into it, unfortunately, where the politics will get to it. Because I
So
don't.
I haven't really been keeping up with like the no, conversation around it. So when you say politics affecting it, then what do you mean?
Okay, so this is all I should preface. I have never
Alleged.
I have never researched these articles.
Okay.
This is all stuff that I've seen on social media. But at some point, um, I it just became so many people kept saying the same thing that it was kind of obvious not to believe what they were saying. So, for example, um, the castings included so many um, actors of color, and in Greek mythology, even people in that played such a high priority role in Homer's Odyssey or the Iliad, specifically the Odyssey, obviously. They were not people of color, especially in Greece and Athens. We're not this To our knowledge, they were not portrayed as people of color. And so the castings pertaining to that, especially for people like Helen of Troy, um, was her the name is escaping me. But then also they were there's a famous rapper, Travis Scott. He's actually going to be in the movie as well. Um, Now I love Travis Scott. I love his music, but also at some point I'm just like, what does he have to do with Greek mythology? And then he wrote a song for the movie, which is great. But then I'm just like, again, what does that have to do with Greek mythology? And then, unfortunately, as disappointing as this is, um, they casted a transgender woman to play the role of Achilles.
Mhm.
Uh, Her name is Elliot Page, and um, I am not happy with that and I know I'm not the only one who's unhappy with this. Many people are very upset by this because they came out with an Achilles movie in early 2000s, and Brad Pitt was Achilles. We're
Mhm.
talking about Greek mythology's arguably strongest warriors, and if you look online and you look up Achilles, the Odyssey, that is not a strong warrior. You look at her and you look at the way that she is portrayed, it's not good. I'm
Mhm.
sorry,
Mhm.
you can you may feel differently or other people may feel differently, but when you look at a warrior, you look at especially Greek mythology, that is not what you should see and that's not what you should expect. And my bet is that Homer did not intend people like that to play roles like that when he wrote the Odyssey, however long ago.
Right.
So
Yeah. Okay, I got you. So yeah, I think that politics in, I guess to bring it back like kind of a wider picture, right? Um, Politics in film is really interesting to me because the way it's evolved, right? It used to be much more about there's kind of there's a discussion in, I guess, art criticism, artistic circles of, is it possible to have non-political art, or is art political by its very nature? And it's interesting because it's very much the discussion around it has shifted from the work itself and the question of, oh, is uh, Fahrenheit 451 political, which obviously it is, to almost more of the process around the creation of the work, like the casting. Um, so it's an interesting cultural shift in there that I think is represented in that as well.
Right. And I don't know how true this is. Preface, I did not research this after I saw this, but I had seen that um, Christopher Nolan was threatened is the wrong word, but he was told that if he didn't make these castings by the Academy, that he would not be considered for any Oscars for this film. So that's unfortunately where I think that filmmaking has gotten to a place where they can threaten people of these great social capital, that if you don't do this, your the trust that you've built up is maybe taken down, and on both sides, from the Academy, because he's not going to do it, because they have the authority to give him the award and then boost his morale even more. But then on the other side, from the audience perspective, nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to see that. You have to, personally, that is not the type of movie that I'm going to pay $18 for a ticket and 30 bucks for food.
Mhm.
That whole experience, and for a 3-hour film, you have to really think about if that is actually worth your time and your money. Now, obviously, I'm going to still go see it because I want to see it, right? But from the moviegoer's perspective, one, is it worth it? And two, are we willing to actually go and support a movie like that? Because if they did it for somebody of stature like Christopher Nolan, who's to say that they're not going to do it to somebody who's smaller, or somebody who's even more powerful, or anything like that? Who's to say that they won't? So it just plays into stuff like that,
Right. It's kind of at the, you know, at the heart of a lot of all of it, and of maybe of a lot of social issues in general, right? Is it's about your audience, right? So you've got your movies that are clearly Oscar bait movies, and you've got your movies that are clearly general audience movies. And so it's I guess, taking it back to business, then it's like you had said earlier, it's about who's your target audience.
Right.
And for, if that all that stuff is accurate, then for Christopher Nolan, for the Odyssey, his target audience is presumably the Oscar or the Academy, right? Which, fair enough, I guess. It's something I certainly wouldn't understand, just because he's already got plenty of awards and whatnot,
Right.
and he doesn't really need the career boost that it brings. But at the same time, who can say the reasoning behind it exactly? But certainly from my perspective, or from a general audience perspective, then it's like, well, I would like you to prioritize me in your decision making process.
Right. And I think what I have seen from somebody like Christopher Nolan is that he does these adaptations of things that we may or may not have already seen. For example, when he did the Dark Knight trilogy, we had already seen a Batman movie.
Mm-hmm.
He just did a different version, and personally, I think that was the best version. And then he was. I actually didn't know this. He was a part of he was one of the screenwriters and producers for Man of Steel. I didn't actually know that. So that I think it was like early 2000s and early 2010s that he was involved a lot with the whole DC writing.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that that is when DC was at its peak. Um,
Wow.
I think because since then, you know, James Gunn has become the his title is escaping me. I want to say he's the co-head of DC. Now, don't get me wrong, I love James Gunn. His work with Guardians of the Galaxy has been absolutely phenomenal. But unfortunately, um, he's I just feel like, for example, Superman. Um, I'll preface I didn't see it, but just from the reviews that I've seen and from clips that I've seen, um, and you're doing a straight one-to-one comparison of Man of Steel and Superman. Man of Steel will, in my opinion, win every time,
Mm.
just because of the way that it was shot. Man of Steel felt real. Superman, when you look at the behind the scenes, they were using a digital studio to film those flying scenes when he's going through those ice things, and they have the wind going, so his cape is blowing, and they I don't remember if the screen was moving with his movement or if they were like he was on a gyro or and they were moving him. I don't remember if that's
I
how they did
believe
it.
he was on a gyro.
Okay. So but to be honest, I don't know. I haven't seen any behind the scenes of Man of Steel. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but just from seeing that, I visited a studio like that where it was completely digital screens. But when I think of a studio like that, where there is no real actual sets being built, they're kind of just generating them, and you just show up. It's still production, but at some point, I feel like it's kind of cheapening the 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 final product that you're trying to create.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Because like when I think of a digital studio, I think of like using it for car commercials, so you don't have to go out and drive. You just bring the car there. You bring the actors there, and
Right.
uh, you shoot those driving scenes just in that studio or something like that. So you don't have to go out and spend money on gas, making sure the car is insured, bring all the rigging equipment for all the automotive videography. You can do all that, but it's going to be fairly costly. Um, or you can just do it in a digital studio. That's kind of what comes to mind. So
Right.
when you're doing something like that, CGI is good, but personally, I feel like it's kind of gone downhill since the early 2000s, 2010s. When I
Mm-hmm.
think of peak CGI, I think of Transformers.
Okay.
Um, that to me is just peak because Michael Bay, I think, revolutionized the way that we look at CGI. From the tiniest of details to the biggest of transformers. Just the way that it was shot and the it didn't feel fake. It was like we were watching the Transformers come to life right there from from the audience's perspective. And then
Mm-hmm.
you watch like the newer Transformers, the one that came out in 2023. That felt it just didn't have that same feel to it. So I don't know really what changed from the past 10 years. I want to say it was the advancement of technology, where things just got so good where you didn't need all these practical effects and building these sets and building all these props where you could really just generate it on a computer, um, or even just hire people to do it for you instead of actually doing it. And what Tom Cruise says is building the most what is how does he say it? Basically, creating the best audience moviegoer experience for the people going and watching. When you create something like that, is just super immersive, and you want to feel like you're there, like you're when I think of that, I think of Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. There was a scene where um, he was underwater and he was in a submarine looking for this artifact, and his oxygen was going down, and the submarine started rolling over, and that intensity, you felt like you were there, like you
Hmm.
felt like you were drowning, and you didn't want Tom Cruise to die, right? Something like that, something so similar. I feel like we've lost that aspect of filmmaking in general. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I think it's very filmmaking is a very complicated topic.
yeah,
It's got a lot of pieces to it, and the pieces that uh, a lot has to come together, right, for
hmm,
something to be good.
yeah,
But I don't think that as much has to come together for something to be enjoyable,
right.
right? And so there's an interesting. I think there has to be a decision, right? Of is this so? If I was to, I think there's really a couple of base things, like fundamental things to any given project that really set it up. You
Hmm.
can either have it. So, for example, do you want this project to be uh, who's the audience? Do you want this to be a mass audience? Do you want this to be targeted towards the academy? Do you want this to be exist for the purposes of artistic expression in a pure sense?
Hmm.
Um, and of course, the difficulty is that there's always the bigger you get, right? The more push there is from the more people to make a profit and whatnot. Um, there's a interesting quote. I don't not saying I fully agree with this, but it's something that was said by George Lucas,
Mm.
saying that his Russian filmmaker friends in the Soviet Union were more free than he was to make
Mm.
what they wanted because they just had to avoid specific content.
Mm.
But other than that, they didn't have to make a profit. They
Right.
didn't have to. They knew what the rules were, and as long as they stayed within the rules, they could
Mhm.
make whatever they want and they didn't need to make money
Hmm.
versus the rules in a kind of profit driven society are a lot more fuzzy and vague.
Right.
Obviously, I'm not advocating for authoritarianism, but
Right.
I think there's value to being able to make films and make art that doesn't need to make money.
True. Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree because I think that in the early part of, I think, Western filmmaking, um, so there's a channel I follow called School of Hard Knocks. One of the guys, he interviewed Tom Cruise, and so when he was interviewing him, Tom Cruise says, he just wanted to create an excellent audience experience for whatever movie he was making. And if it made a little bit of money, great. If not, that's okay. But the money that the movie made, the studio could take that money and invest it into future projects. That was his whole uh, way of thinking, and I totally resonated with that. I was just like, oh, that's a really good point, because if we can take the funding or even the profit that we made from just one film and just invest it into just like either pre-production of 3 to 5 different projects, or investing in just in one, and that whole thing is your entire budget. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole science to the way that major studios go about the profits, and how they utilize that. But I just think that it's, unfortunately, between major studios like um, Disney, Universal, Paramount, um, and even DC. I just think that it's gotten to a place where they're super obsessed with making sure they spend the most amount of money and not necessarily focused on the key story aspects of it, where production quality is great, the cinematography is the quality is there of the production, but the quality of the story is incredibly lacking.
Right. And it's the same
How do
thing. Kind of the same thing is happening in game production too, right? Of uh, this is maybe a little in the weeds, but live service games, for those who don't know, are basically infinite games like Fortnite or something, which continually are making new content, new stuff for people to purchase, and typically then the game itself is free to play. It's just
right,
within in-game purchases they make money, and that is a way that you can make a ton of money if it's successful. But there's been maybe 4 truly successful live service games in history. But a lot of major game studios are so focused, or they're kind of getting past it. They're kind of learning now, starting to. But the last 5 years or so have been dominated by people trying to make all the money
yeah,
and ignoring the fact that they can make good quality normal games
yeah,
and make a lot of money.
yeah,
It's like going to Vegas, you know. It's like going to Vegas and oh, I won. I've doubled my money. Obviously, you should quit, but you could make a little more. And stock market,
yeah,
oh, cool. If I sell now, I'll be making a 50% profit.
right,
But if I wait till tomorrow, I can make a 61% or a 51% profit.
mm-hmm.
It's just that mentality of what's been defined in American culture as winning is
Yeah,
making the most money.
yeah,
And that dominates so many areas of our lives, and from the biggest studios down to the way that individuals grow up thinking about money.
yeah. No, because even with um, just Western society in general, I think that due to social media, um, you know, we've just gotten so caught up in comparing ourselves to other people who uh, have made it and have a successful business, are living a successful life, and then people who are kind of like are comparing themselves, thinking of these gurus are saying, "Oh, you can do it just like me. You just need to buy a course, right?" And just like that, you'll get instant success. People buy those courses and they don't learn it. They don't learn a thing. That's
Mm-hmm.
it's attributing to a lot of different factors. I think the biggest one is the lack of discipline, because you're only seeing these successful entrepreneurs and these successful business owners after they've made it.
Mm-hmm.
All it takes is one thing. That's all it takes. But you're only seeing the final product. You're not seeing all the sleepless nights. You're not seeing all the blood, sweat, and tears that they poured into their business and all that stuff. You're not seeing that. You're only seeing when they're on a yacht or where they have 10 cars. And we constantly play this game of comparison, and it's not good for our minds and our well-being, because we want to be living those lives. But then we're just like, oh no, I can't because I'm working this terrible job. Then we start playing into this victim mentality where it's just like, oh, I'll never do that because I didn't have a good upbringing. I came from a single mom. Oh, that's all I'll ever be. I'll just be a manager at a fast food place. Everybody has the same opportunities as everybody else. If you continue to work hard and put your head down, it's going to be hard. I believe that if you continue to put in the hard work, continue to put in all that time, and trust that one way or another, somebody is going to notice it. Somebody, and somebody is actually going to take a chance on you. And then as soon as that comes, who knows? We have all these different doors of opportunity, but we are constantly playing this game of comparison. Oh, I wish I had that. I wish I had that house. I wish I had that car. Oh, they have such a good marriage. They had their family is super successful. Why can't I be like that? Oh, I'll never amount to anything. Everybody, I believe, and this plays into the concept of the American dream. Everybody has the same opportunities. It's just about how you are going to. Um, it's all about how you use your time and the types of people that you connect with. It's about putting yourself into uncomfortable situations that sooner or later may or may not actually pay off. So, tying that into what you were saying, you're comparing a lot of these like indie filmmakers to all these major studios. You want to be making hundreds of millions of dollars off of your film because it's distributed across the world. Everybody, I'm willing to bet every filmmaker out there, indie filmmaker, anything that wants to make a movie that makes a lot of money. But you don't need hundreds of millions of dollars to make that happen. For example, the movie Obsession that came out in, I believe it was October. That movie had a budget of $750,000 and has done close to $500 million in box office. That's simply because indie filmmakers know where to hit the audience, know what kind of story they're wanting to watch.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. For sure. I want to circle back to. I'll comment on that, and then I want to circle back to one thing
Sure.
that you said. Um, I mean, I think maybe the most famous, like, or I guess a funny example of that is the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey horror movie. It
Mm,
made a ton of money. It made a huge profit margin because it was produced super cheaply.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, profit. There's a big difference between profit, the number, and profit margin.
Yeah.
How that number relates to what you invested into it.
Sure.
Um, and then cycling back just a little bit, I want to give a counterpoint. So I agree with like 80% of what you said. I
Okay.
want to give a counterpoint to that last 20.
Sure.
So on that, everybody has the same opportunities idea, right? Um, I would. So there's a concept called survivor bias.
Okay.
And what's cited a lot as an example of this is in World War II, then the planes would come back home from bombing raids. And the engineers would be like, okay, guys, look at where the planes got shot, where the bullet holes are, and we should reinforce those areas. And I forget his name, but there was a one guy who famously said, no, we should reinforce the areas that didn't get shot because the planes that got shot there didn't come home.
Mm.
And so it's this idea of we tend to look at the people who succeed and say, okay, that's how you succeed.
Mm.
Not, but the reality is when only a small fraction of people succeed, it's perhaps more valuable to look at what causes you to fail.
Mm. Yeah.
And so I'd say that, the reality is that not everyone has equal opportunities, right? If you don't have a very large, to take a small example, if you don't have a very large social network, right? If you grew up in a small town, let's say, and you want to become a filmmaker, your odds of knowing someone who has any connection to the film industry are much lower than someone who grew up in LA,
Mm.
right? And that connection could be the one difference between working your whole life to be a filmmaker and being either unsuccessful or just barely making it by, and working your whole life to become a filmmaker and becoming very successful. It's just that one early connection point.
Yeah.
The best way I think I've ever heard this put was by a guy. He's a comedian and improviser named Brennan Lee Mulligan. And he, in an interview, once said that he thought about life like a big wheel or a big carousel that everybody's on, and he knew a lot of other kids who grew up with more money, who grew up with more connections, essentially had a lot of opportunities to jump up and grab a golden ring,
Mm.
the golden ring of success, and he knew that he was only going to get because of his circumstance, he knew he was only gonna get one shot at that golden ring. There was only one golden ring for him to grab, and he had to be prepared to jump up and grab it when it came along.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess I would argue that 80% of success is luck, and all that you can really do is make sure that you're prepared to capitalize on that luck when it comes.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. I remember when I was well, thank you for sharing that. That was very well said. I remember in my freshman year, I was doing these one-on-one Bible studies with my small group leader, and I just remember telling him, I just feel like God is preparing me for something. I don't know what, I don't know when, I don't know how. I just know that I just feel like He's preparing me for something bigger than what I'm already doing right now. And all I know is that I have to be ready. I have to feel prepared. And so that feeling is definitely there, because that moment came by surprise where I felt like I was ready, where I just started connecting with people at a kind of like a networking event through my school. And I just remember connecting with all these different actors. I remember we were literally just supposed to be casting for 2 different roles. And it was for a scene recreation project, something like the bar could not be lower. Like there were no standards or anything like that. He just wanted us to recreate a scene from the movie. And I remember I was just like, okay. I emailed the professor who was in charge of the theater department, and it's like, oh, okay, that's great. You know, we have this a networking event between filmmakers and actors. Feel free to come and just make any connections. Everybody in my group, there was 3 other people in my group, was just making conversation. I was still making conversation, but I was working the entire room, asking for people's numbers and asking for if they were interested in working on a project with us. And I was the only one who did that. The one in my group, and I think throughout the entirety of, I think there were only a handful of other people. But it was at that moment that I decided to take my filmmaking journey seriously, because it was my first time ever doing anything like that. And the moment that I decided to do that, from that point on, from my remainder of that time in my community college, I just felt like people in different classes and the job that I was working from, just walking through hallways, people were just coming my way in ways I wouldn't have expected or imagined. But it required me to be in a situation of meeting all these people who I had not met before. One of those guys is still my closest friends today. And so if it wasn't for me putting myself out there, I wouldn't be where I am right now, you know? And so to those people, I would say, like Josh said, always be prepared. Whatever that takes, asking the right people the right questions, learning from, I mean, it sounds really silly, but learning from YouTube. YouTube is a free resource. You don't have to pay. It's readily there. Just learn, sit there, and just follow down a rabbit hole. The whole, I don't know if I've said this. At 3 in the morning on a December night, I just had an idea that I felt like God gave me to start a podcast. And I'm just like, I don't remember, or I didn't really understand why. I just knew that I wanted to talk about film, and I wanted to talk about how film can be tied in with our faith, and that anybody can do it. It's not exclusive to just a select few of people. Anybody can do this. And at 3 in the morning, I just remember falling down this rabbit hole of looking at different softwares, coming up with a list of people I'd love to invite, and just scheduling it out. And I started in February, and from February to now, I mean, this has been 5 months, and this is my 18th episode, and last episode of season. I honestly never thought that anybody was going to ever watch this. And after 18 episodes and consistently posting every single day for 5 months, I just surpassed 55,000 views. Something
Dang.
I never would have expected
Yeah.
anybody to watch this. I thought it was just going to be exclusive to family.
Yeah.
From all four or five of my platforms, I would have never expected this. But again, that's what Josh is saying. I this was complete randomness. God gave me an idea, and I just decided to research it. And then I realized that there are all these resources readily available that you don't have to spend a lot of money for, or even they have a free version, and it is limited. But they things like StreamYard. I mean, I this is something that I just found randomly through YouTube. And I'm just like, oh, actually, I think I could use this. And then I realized that I could stream directly onto YouTube. I could invite guests. They could set up their own camera and their own mic. I could have my own setup at my house. There, I streamed for once a week, and it would allow me to one live stream, which is something I've been wanting to do for a while, but two, take that content and then figure out that there is an AI editing tool called Opus Clip where you can cut up your clips from an hour or 2 hours worth of footage and turn that into 25, 30 videos that is under 90 seconds. So, like, I'm telling you, like, this is not something that I ever would have thought or imagined somebody would, one, tell me that I was going to do this year, or two, that anybody would actually even watch this. So, I mean, it's all about putting yourself in in that state of mind, in that mindset that you are ready, and preparing yourself for when it does come, because it will come. And more often than not, it's actually going to take you by surprise, but it will come. And when you do, you have to be ready. So, anyways, sorry, long
Right.
story. I totally agree
Yeah.
with you. Yeah,
Yeah. No, I didn't know that story of how this got started. So.
yeah, it's crazy. So, yeah, kind of as we slowly close out, I typically like to ask all my guests if there's one thing that you would like to share with people of our generation, or just people of the older generation or younger generation. Just one nugget of wisdom. What would that be?
Hmm. That's an interesting question. Um, I know the general kind of category of things that it's within, so I'll just start talking on that and see where I come to.
Sure.
So I guess going back to the very beginning of this, right? You asked about kind of storytelling, philosophy, and the meaning of art and that kind of stuff. And I'd say that getting into that a little more, I think that all storytelling's kind of a exercising catharsis.
Mm.
Catharsis just being, I forget the exact Greek or let me see. Catharsis. Yeah. It basically like cleansing, purification. At a glance, I think there's a better or a more exact kind of Greek translation of that. But um, narratives are a way to cleanse our souls, and stories are a way to express our souls. There was something that I realized recently, which is that there's only certain people who I'll share that I like certain songs or certain movies with. And the reasoning for that isn't because oh, I'm embarrassed that I like this movie or something. It's because they're very deeply personal to me,
Mm,
and I feel very, and to share that I like it is to share kind of a piece of myself.
yeah.
Um, there's a lot of pieces of media that have a way of saying, of expressing things about us, about our souls, and about our stories in life, which I don't have the words to express, right? I'm trying to think of a concrete example. Um, but I guess a good example would just be something simple like, or simple, but perhaps the most poignant iteration of this, which would just be a piece of media which explores death in some way,
Mm,
right? That's maybe the most uh, universal thing to tell a story about is death. It's the universal experience, right?
mhm,
And oftentimes, I think stories that explore death allow us, allow those who have been touched by death in some way to come to know themselves better.
mm,
Uh, it's a lot of catharsis, catharsis of that, just releasing that emotion or releasing the feelings. So I guess my wisdom would be, if I had to summarize it in a phrase, it would be cry at movies, or let yourself cry in the movie theater, because that is ultimately, I think, the highest thing that art can do,
mm.
is to help us see our own souls and help us understand ourselves better, uh,
Mm.
express ourselves through it.
Wow.
Yeah,
That was very, very well said. Um,
thank you. That's what 10 years of improv will do.
well, thank you for joining. I really do appreciate it. I do like to close out with a blessing to all those who are watching from Numbers 6:24 through 26. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Guys, I just want to say thank you guys so much for the past 18 episodes. Season 1 is coming to a close after this episode. I will be taking a little bit of a break. But just from what I have seen, from really just the consistency of posting, and even being able to connect with all these amazing people from the past 18 episodes, um, from people who are in the production space, who are actresses, people who are just family friends. Thank you guys for being a part of this. It has meant so much to me, and to really be able to ask these types of questions that have really been asking for one, the viewers, but two, more for myself, because I've been growing along this journey as well, especially going into my senior year of college. I feel like there's a lot of uncertainty that comes with that chapter coming to a close. And so I've been asking a lot of these questions more for myself than I have been for just the viewers. But all that to say, this has been such an incredible journey. I will be back. This is not the end of it. Just going to be taking a little bit of a break. But to all those, especially all my guests, and to you, Josh, thank you for taking the time to chat with me, and to really be able to pour out your wisdom, not just for myself, but anybody else who has just stumbled upon my channels. I hope that in some capacity they take away at least one thing from each of the episodes and can apply that to their own life, and also to know that this whole thing, like I had said earlier, this is not a high budget production podcast. This is me using my laptop and a webcam and a mic and just making sure I have the right tools. to be able to post consistently, and it does take time. Um, but to know that I can do it. If I can do it, then you can do it too. And I feel like that is one thing that I feel like the Lord has been teaching me is if He can do it for somebody like me, then He can do it for you. So please take that away from whatever it is that you're trying to do in life. Um, he has got a plan and a purpose for you, and you got to trust that He is going to work all things for your good. But trust, and again, back to what we were saying earlier, you must be prepared in every sense of the word, and you have to be prepared. Whatever that takes, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's probably going to suck, and it's going to require discipline. Something that I'm currently working on. It's not, I don't have this figured out, uh, but it's going to require a lot of hard work. But when you do, that is when I believe true discipline comes out, and you're actually able to. That's where I think the Lord actually does abundantly bless you. Um, and so, all that to say, continue pushing forward and trust and know that God does have a plan for your life. And there is nothing too hard. Uh, there's always going to be resources out there for you to accomplish your dreams, and it might not be at the production quality that you want, but it's better to start somewhere and doing a little bit every single day than not at all. So all that to say, thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Please share with your friends, and definitely come back for season two. This is it's like I said, it's been an amazing journey. And just thank you guys. Thank you, Josh, for joining us for today's episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And if I may,
please.
if you viewers make anything inspired by that message, or if this kind of gives you a push to create anything that's online based, send it to Jonathan.
Mm,
Let him know. Let him know that he had an impact.
yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you guys. I really do appreciate it. This is going to be it for today's episode. Again, please like and subscribe, share with your friends. And yeah, I will see you guys shortly. There's there are going to be content coming out for this episode, and then it's going to be at least a month or two before I come back. But you guys, there's so much more to come. Please definitely check out some of my other channels. I have a lot of new content that is going to be coming out. But yeah, thank you guys. And again, share with your friends. And thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Peace.